Okay, so here's how to play Vayne in Season 14. The first thing people tried to do with Vayne this season was play her with a lethality / one-shot / burst damage build, which makes sense when considering how strong lethality items are right now. But this is actually not the best way to play this champion, and Vayne 1 tricks quickly started to realize. While the burst Vayne build is still around and quite a few people really enjoy playing it, going for on-hit items on Vayne is just overall better, especially because these items also got buffed for her in unique ways. However, apart from the item changes, the new season wasn't exactly kind to Vayne. She's an extremely difficult champion to play anyway, and the jungle changes effectively accentuated Vayne's weak early game. There are two game states in the bot lane right now. Either the junglers try to snowball the lane with the new gank paths, camping all the time, this can end very badly for you as the Vayne player if executed poorly, or both junglers contest void grabs, completely leaving bot lane to their own devices. In this case, Vayne must stand her ground in the 2v2 despite being a weak laner. However, if you know how to play around that, you will be able to unlock Vayne's late game power spikes, which are stronger this season than ever before. A high skill, high reward champion which can be very satisfying to play, especially when you learn to apply everything I show you in this video. I'll now tell you about Vayne's optimal rune and item setups so you can copy those right away, before then teaching you about her power spikes and how to take advantage of them. But please keep in mind that Vayne is one of the more difficult marksmen you can play, and you will also need lots of practice if you want to unlock her true potential. However, you can speed up this process by a lot if you don't just practice Vayne by yourself, but instead work with a true challenger coach in hand-tailored one-on-one lessons. This is where my sponsor Solo Queue Solution comes in. They have high elo challenger coaches for all 5 roles, so anyone who wants to make fast and meaningful improvements at League of Legends will benefit greatly from their coaching program. They've helped countless players to go from hard-stuck silver to diamond and beyond, since at the end of the day, League of Legends is not a game of luck, but a game of skill, so a teacher who knows what they're doing is a guaranteed path to success. Of course, coaching only makes sense for you if you're actually dedicated to climbing in solo queue, but if League is your main hobby, which means you play at least 15 hours of ranked per week, the coaching program could be just what you need to excel. You'll find all the info and a link for booking in the description of the video. With that being said, let's talk about Vayne's optimal Season 14 rune page. You go for Lethal Tempo, Triumph, Legend Alacrity and Coup de Grace, with Conditioning and Overgrowth secondary. Vayne's value as a champion is her attack speed. Everything you can do is directly tied back to this stat, and Lethal Tempo is a natural choice because of that. Not only does the rune itself give you more attack speed, but it also synergizes with the attack speed you already buy, and Vayne buys a lot of attack speed, spoiler alert. And, well, you need some attack speed first and foremost in order to actually get the Lethal Tempo stacks. It's kind of a weird dynamic. Lethal Tempo gives you attack speed, which is good if you don't have attack speed, but it only gives you the attack speed if you can already attack fast enough in the first place. However, for Vayne that's not a problem, and Lethal Tempo also takes the disadvantage away from buying too much attack speed, which is of course the attack speed cap. It is just the best scaling keystone for Vayne, and as you know, Vayne is also a scaling champion, so go all in on that late game plan. But this rune, make no mistake, is good at all stages of the game. Even when you just have Berserker's Greaves, you can already unlock its full potential in early skirmishes should it come to that. But a general piece of advice, you should avoid early skirmishes unless they're completely free, but you'll see that in the analysis. Now for the next slot you want Triumph. Overheal is in a terrible state right now and Presence of Mind doesn't really make sense on Vayne, and Triumph is just a great insurance. You won't build all that much lifesteal because again the main stat you need is attack speed, so Triumph will counteract that because you will take a lot of damage being the priority target you are. This rune allows you to keep going in fights, which is especially potent since you want longer fights in order to get maximum value from Lethal Tempo and from your attack speed in general. With that in mind, it also shouldn't be a surprise that Legend Alacrity is your next rune of choice, because again, attack speed is everything on this champion, and yes, you don't buy as much lifesteal, but Legend Bloodline just takes ages to scale, and Legend Alacrity is a lot of upfront value with the most important stat for this champion. Now Coup de Grace is your default choice in the next row, because Vayne doesn't have any special synergies with the others. Well, actually Last Stand could be good in some situations, but please stay away from Cutdown. This rune is not good on Vayne. Cutdown can be used on most AD carries against very tanky matchups, but Vayne actually stacks a lot of HP, and she deals with tanks anyway with her W true damage, so Coup de Grace is the way to go. I mean, you can already see on the secondary path why Cutdown is no good. You go for Conditioning and Overgrowth after all, and Conditioning, well, it's quite straightforward. A rune that does nothing during the early game. Again, Vayne's early game is weak, you need to keep that in mind, but in the late game this can be a game changer. Normally on a squishy champion, the main value here is the flat armor and magic resist, but Vayne actually buys a lot of armor and magic resist in her items too, as you will see, so conditioning has extra value in this case. Now Overgrowth is another late game scaling rune giving you a lot of HP to work with and has synergy with Cutdown. I don't think I need to elaborate on that more, but the HP is absolutely invaluable. You know, AD carries are prone to getting one-shot, and especially Vayne because you are such a priority high damage target, and Overgrowth will save you. The reason Vayne can afford to do that, by the way, is her W mainly, because W is your late game insurance. With enough attack speed you will have enough damage always to gun down any opponent. Other AD carries would need the attack damage from Absolute Focus and Gathering Storm, but again, on Vayne it's just much better to spec into defensive stats. Okay, now before I show you the best item build, let's quickly talk about that burst damage build I alluded to earlier. If you really want to play this, and it is viable in my opinion, just slightly outclassed by the other build, here you go. First item Stormrazor, then finish Berserker's Greaves, then Essence Reaver, and then Voltaic Cyclosword, Collector and Ghostblade. As you can see, your game plan fully revolves around burst damage with this one, getting your Q as strong as possible. You'd also play this not with lethal tempo, but instead with fleet footwork, because you have to kite a lot with this build. It falls off in the late game, but again it is kept together by your W scaling, so tanks will not shut this down, and squishies just fall to this. Admittedly, this is a lot of fun to play, but again the best build is as follows. You rush Berserker's Greaves as fast as possible, then finish Blade of the Ruined King, and then Rage Blade. For the late game you have Wit's End and Terminus, and then you have options of Guardian Angel, Experimental Hexblade, and even Jackshaw the Protean for your last item. Berserker's Greaves are crucial of course if you go for lethal tempo, because it's a lot of attack speed up front and a very cheap completed item. It keeps you safe, lets you pick your own fights, and also unlocks a lot of damage as I've already said. But Blade of the Ruined King, this is the big one. This item got massively buffed for Vayne. It looks minor, but it actually makes a big difference. Back in the day you needed 3 auto attacks in order to unlock Blade of the Ruined King's passive effect, which drained the enemy of some health and also drained them of their movement speed. This was quite nice because Vayne wants to get 3 attacks in anyway with her W, but nowadays Blade of the Ruined King triggers on the first attack already. It doesn't deal damage anymore, but it still reduces the enemy movement speed, which makes it easier to hit following attacks. They are slowed down by Blade of the Ruined King's passive instantly, you are sped up by your own passive, and then you can just keep firing, keep stacking the lethal tempo and apply your on-hit damage. It is a really crazy item on Vayne, unlocking a lot of what you want to do. Now Rageblade's second is also set in stone because the item is just way too efficient when you already have Blade of the Ruined King and Vayne's W, but the following items are quite interesting. Both Wit's End and Terminus are phenomenal on Vayne, but you can get Terminus before Wit's End in some matchups. Both items have their place, but ironically not as offensive items, but as semi-defensive ones. Wit's End is preferred as a third purchase because the item now gives tenacity. AD carries have a tenacity option that doesn't force them away from Berserker's Greaves. The enemy will try to lock you down when playing Vayne, 24/7 essentially, so the tenacity on Wit's End is invaluable, but if they don't have much crowd control, Terminus is a little bit better. The reason is that Terminus gives you both armor and magic resist as you keep attacking, and again, defensive stats on Vayne go a long way. Wit's End plus Terminus make you surprisingly hard to take down while still enabling you to deal a lot of damage. Now for the last item you can just go Guardian Angel like most other AD carries because it's just a great value late game pick, but Experimental Hexblade is also very interesting. A lot of Vayne's power comes from her ultimate, and Experimental Hexblade makes that even more consistent. More uptime on your ult, and when you press it you just get more attack speed and more movement speed, which makes hunting the enemy down even easier. But to be fair, in most situations Hexblade would be overkill, and the main selling point is also the extra health it provides. In many situations, Jackshaw the Protean would actually be the best last pickup, because it not only provides health but even more armor and magic resist, which gets amplified over the course of the fight. It is really just the perfect combo. You already have a lot of health from your rune page, you get stacking armor and magic resist from Terminus while fighting, and then even multiply that with a Jackshaw value. This build just does everything, unlocks all of your damage while also preventing the enemy from just one-shotting you. However, a full item Vayne will likely carry the game anyway, but the real problem is getting there in the first place, so let's jump into the analysis so you see how that works. Vayne is extremely vulnerable during the early game. You need to be patient and scale, so when you instead go for foolish early fights like this, expect them to end poorly. This champion simply doesn't have a poking spell for trading, and everything you can do depends on how much attack speed you have. If you can't auto-attack, you can't do anything, and this also extends to your wave clear. Vayne during the early game is a complete punching bag, so it is your job to stay safe and get as much farm as you can. Yes, you will lose some CS against good opponents, but as long as you get experience, you're doing fine. And sure, there will be the occasional opening created for you by your support, where you can get some attacks in, but don't overcommit here. You must play for your power spikes first and foremost. The more you can just farm it up and the closer you can stay near the safety of your tower, the better. Don't make the lane phase unnecessarily complicated for yourself when you choose to play such a late game powerhouse. However, your first big relative power spike, giving a lot of agency back to you, actually comes earlier than you might think. As soon as Vayne reaches level 6, she suddenly turns into a rather potent all-in duelist, and you can be a little bit more aggressive now, but of course don't get ahead of yourself anyway. Forcing early plays is always risky for a champion that needs to scale. Keep it safe, keep it simple. But of course, should a promising opportunity present itself, you are now perfectly equipped to capitalize. The first thing that enabled this play is Ezreal being out of position in the long bot lane. Vayne is very good at chasing, so when there is a lot of distance to cover, Vayne can truly shine, even catch up when Ezreal jumps. And in addition to that, Karma is also far away, turning the situation into a 2v1 in Vayne's favor, which is a good sign to go in. And secondly, on top of that, we have the added synergy between Vayne and an Enchanter support. The Enchanter has lots of peel and disengage if you need it potentially, so she can keep Vayne safe even during an aggressive situation like this one. Vayne plus Enchanter is much better than Vayne plus any other type of support. Yet the true tipping point in the game, the moment where you can start playing with confidence, is not when you reach level 6, but when you also finish Blade of the Ruined King. It is probably more helpful to watch from Ezreal's perspective first. Controlling the lane bushes when playing Vayne is actually a very big deal, as we just saw, because with controlling the bushes, when you know the enemy doesn't have a ward and the enemy doesn't have a reliable way of checking, Ezreal's Q hardly counts as you can see, you can actually press R while still in the bush, exit the bush in stealth, so you can then sneak up on the enemy and start attacking them without them seeing it coming. By the time they see you, it's just too late. In addition to that, your DPS with Blade of the Ruined King and attack speed boots is just huge, and especially the initial slow on your first auto attack with Blade of the Ruined King enables your dueling potential fully. The enemy has very little chance to get away at that point. This Blade of the Ruined King power spike is also where you can start to help nearby skirmishes in a meaningful way. Your front-to-back fighting is great, since it really doesn't matter whom you attack due to your W true damage. Any target will go down quickly, and especially in the jungle, it is also very easy to unlock the stun from your E, leaving the victim helpless. However, this is no reason to start letting your guard down. You are still the priority target, and while your scaling defensive runes are helpful, they will not save you from everything. In this clip, it is probably easy for you to see what will actually keep you safe. Vayne is a good 1v1 duelist, but don't expect the enemies to play into that. They will assassinate you in numbers to one-shot you, so you absolutely need to be close to a teammate with peel. If you are alone here, you would be dead instantly, but with Lulu you unlock all of Vayne's damage and can turn the situation around completely, so never go alone unless you know where the enemies are. And this is also true in the mid and late game. Ideally, you never operate without having an ally nearby who can help you when you get attacked again. And trust me, the enemy will be greeding for your blood, and wandering off by yourself is going to be costly. But as long as you have a Lulu behind you, well, Rengar will not even dare, he will just run. Yet keep in mind that your own positioning also must be at least decent. Here Vayne suddenly finds herself frontlining while the enemy approaches, so if she wants her team to have a chance of keeping her safe, she must change that as fast as possible. Here we could see a preventive flash backwards into her team, which is crucial because once you are locked up, you're out of options. Use flash defensively to fix your positioning. Evidently, safety should be your #1 concern during that late game teamfighting phase, But especially when your flash is ready, you can be quite daring. You might be a priority target, but this is also the strongest point in the game for you. You would essentially never position this aggressively when Flash is on cooldown, but Vayne has it here, so she can set herself up to capitalize on Malphite's ultimate engage. You of course have to know when to pull the trigger with Flash, but this one's easy. Just dodge the first hard crowd control spell that would otherwise hit you and you're good to go. In general, however, you want the enemy to overextend into you, not vice versa. They will get greedy eventually, and as long as you don't isolate yourself from your teammates, you will be in position to punish their greed. But of course, if you want to actually unlock Vayne's late game power, your most important task is to not feed during the lane phase. However, you can watch my full AD carry lane phase guide by clicking the link on your screen.